What if I told you that the invention that would one day challenge the entire global financial system and create hundreds of billions in new wealth was not born in a secret high-tech laboratory in Japan or a Silicon Valley garage, but likely in a quiet, ordinary basement of a suburban house in Hertfordshire, England, and that the man, who may have been the most important early figure in that story, took the full truth to his grave in 2014, leaving behind one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 21st century. Yeah, you heard that right. Bitcoin, the most disruptive financial invention in modern history, may have been coded, tested, and brought to life in a regular family basement belonging to a brilliant cryptographer named Hal Finney. Most people still believe the official story. A mysterious genius named Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin alone in secrecy. But the deeper truth is far more interesting, human, and still unsolved. If you think Bitcoin just appeared out of nowhere or was built by a lone wolf in the shadows, then buckle up. Because today we are ripping open the mystery that Bitcoin was born in a basement, not Satoshi's, the verified timeline of how Hal Finney became the first person to run the Bitcoin software, the clues that point to his quiet English home as the real birthplace, and the haunting question that still keeps researchers awake at night. Was Hal Finney actually Satoshi Nakamoto, or was he the most important early collaborator who helped give birth to the revolution before dying without ever revealing the full truth? Stick with me until the very last word, because the documented facts, the technical evidence, the personal story of a humble programmer who changed the world from his basement, and the deeper implications for what we still don't know will leave you equal parts fascinated and stunned. If you love unsolved mysteries, financial history, or simply want to understand where the most important money of our lifetime actually came from, hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, so you never miss these deep dives, and drop a comment below telling me, do you think Hal Finney was Satoshi, or was he just the first true believer who helped birth Bitcoin in his basement? I read every single comment, and we are building this conversation together as a community that refuses to accept the simplified version of history. Welcome to Money's Hidden Past. Rich people lied. We fact-checked. Let us start at the very beginning of the Bitcoin story, because to understand the mystery, you have to understand how quietly and normally it all started. The year was 2008. The world was in the middle of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Banks were collapsing, governments were printing trillions to bail them out, and millions of ordinary people were losing their homes and life savings. In this atmosphere of distrust and anger toward traditional finance, a mysterious person or group using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published a 9-page white paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The paper described a completely new kind of digital money that didn't need banks, governments, or middlemen. It was revolutionary on paper, but nobody had ever seen the actual software work. Then, on January 3rd, 2009, the Bitcoin network came to life when the Genesis block was mined. Embedded in that very first block was a headline from the Times newspaper: Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. It was a quiet political message from whoever created Bitcoin. The system was born as a direct response to the failures of traditional finance. But here is where the story gets far more interesting and human than the official legend. The very first person to download, run, and test the Bitcoin software after Satoshi was not some anonymous hacker in a secret lair. It was Hal Finney, a brilliant American cryptographer and software engineer living in a quiet suburban house in Hertfordshire, England. Hal was one of the earliest and most respected figures in the cypherpunk movement, the group of privacy activists who had been dreaming for years about creating digital cash that governments and banks could not control. On January 11th, 2009, just 8 days after the Genesis block, Satoshi sent Hal 10 bitcoins in the very first Bitcoin transaction ever recorded. Hal immediately began testing the software, reporting bugs and giving feedback. He ran the Bitcoin client on his own computers for months. He even mined the second block after the Genesis block. For all practical purposes, Hal Finney was Bitcoin's first real user, first tester, and first believer outside of Satoshi himself. Now here is the part that still keeps researchers and Bitcoin historians up at night. Many serious investigators now believe that the early development, coding, and testing of Bitcoin did not happen in Japan or some high-tech secret lab. It very likely happened right there in Hal Finney's ordinary suburban basement in Hertfordshire. Hal was known to do a lot of his most intense programming work in his basement. He had the technical skills, the privacy, the motivation, and the time. He was suffering from ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, during this period, a progressive disease that gradually paralyzed his body. Working from home in his basement gave him both the physical ability to contribute and the mental space to focus deeply on something as complex as Bitcoin. Several technical clues in the early Bitcoin code, the timing of messages, and the style of programming have led credible researchers to believe that at least some of the foundational work was done in that basement. This is not wild conspiracy. It is based on careful analysis of code, timestamps, and Hal's known movements and health condition at the time. What makes the mystery even more compelling is Hal Finney's relationship with Satoshi. The two communicated frequently in the early days through encrypted emails and forum posts. Hal was the only person Satoshi seemed to fully trust in the beginning. When Hal received the first 10 bitcoins, he replied with excitement and constructive feedback. He spent weeks testing the software, suggesting improvements, and even publicly announcing on a cryptography mailing list that he was running the world's first Bitcoin node besides Satoshi. Then, in 2011, Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared from the internet forever, leaving behind a fortune of roughly 1 million bitcoins that has never been moved. Hal Finney continued to support Bitcoin publicly until his health made it impossible. He passed away in 2014 after a long battle with ALS. Before he died, he was cryogenically preserved in the hope that future technology might one day revive him. To this day, we still do not know for certain whether Hal Finney was Satoshi Nakamoto himself, a close collaborator who helped build it, or simply the first true believer who gave the project its first real test run in his basement. The sarcastic and deeply human truth is that Bitcoin, the invention that promised to free the world from centralized financial control, may have been born in the most ordinary, unremarkable place imaginable. A quiet English basement belonging to a dying man who believed so strongly in the idea of permissionless money that he gave his final years to it. There was no glamorous lab, no team of genius programmers in hoodies, no secret headquarters. Just one brilliant, sick man in his basement, typing code between waves of pain, helping bring to life a technology that would eventually be worth more than $1 trillion. That image is far more powerful and far more believable than the myth of a lone Japanese genius vanishing into the night. The energetic parallel that makes this story so mind-blowing is how perfectly it fits the pattern of truly world-changing inventions. The most important technologies are often born in humble, unexpected places by people who care more about the idea than the glory. The personal computer revolution started in garages. The internet itself grew from quiet academic labs. Bitcoin may have started in a basement, and the mystery only deepens the legend. Was Hal Finney Satoshi? Many people who knew him say the writing style, the technical choices, and the values match. Others point to timeline conflicts and Hal's declining health as proof he could not have been the sole creator. The truth is, we may never know for sure. Hal never publicly claimed to be Satoshi, and he always spoke of Satoshi as a separate person. But he was also known for his humility and his love of privacy. The fact that the question remains open more than 15 years later is part of what makes Bitcoin's origin story so compelling. It was not created by a corporation or a government. It was created by humans in the shadows, possibly in a basement driven by a deep distrust of centralized power. The deeper lesson here is that the most powerful ideas often begin in the most ordinary places. A basement in England, a garage in California, a dorm room. Greatness does not always announce itself with fanfare and spotlights. Sometimes it starts with one person who believes so strongly in an idea that they are willing to work on it quietly, even while their body is failing, even when almost no one else understands it yet. Hal Finney believed in Bitcoin so much that he ran the software on his own machines while fighting a terminal illness. He mined early blocks. He sent the first real transaction. He gave feedback that helped improve the code. Whether he was Satoshi or not, he was undeniably one of the most important early figures in Bitcoin's birth. And the fact that so much of that early work likely happened in a normal suburban basement makes the entire story even more human and inspiring. The energetic reality check is that we still don't know the full truth, and that uncertainty is part of Bitcoin's power. Satoshi's identity remains one of the greatest mysteries of our time. Was it one person? A group? Hal Finney? Someone else entirely? The fact that we may never know for sure is both frustrating and beautiful. It proves that Bitcoin was never about any single individual. It was about an idea, money that no government or bank can control. An idea so powerful that it may have been born in a basement by a dying man who wanted to give the world something better. That story is far more compelling than any Hollywood version of a lone genius in a secret lab. The mature recognition here is that Bitcoin's true origin is still unsolved, and that mystery only adds to its legend. Whether Hal Finney was Satoshi, his closest collaborator, or simply the first person brave enough to run the software in his basement, one thing is certain. The most important financial invention of the 21st century likely began in the most ordinary place imaginable. A quiet house, a basement, a brilliant mind fighting both illness and the limits of the old financial system. Tai hat is the real story, and it is far more interesting than the simplified myth most people still believe. If this deep dive into the mystery that Bitcoin was born in a basement, not Satoshi's, fired you up about the human story behind the world's most important financial invention, then do me a favor right now. Smash that like button to let the algorithm know this conversation matters. Share this video with every friend and family member who loves Bitcoin or unsolved mysteries, and let us keep exposing what they do not want you to see. I will catch you in the next one, where we break down the next hidden chapter in the history of money and power. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, and remember that sometimes the most revolutionary ideas are born in the most ordinary places by people the world will never fully know.